Hello everyone, welcome back. This is another one from that guy whose name I cannot say. And I just can't pronounce it. America uses the UN to perpetuate conflict. I will just start this video by saying I kind of agree. Maybe not to perpetuate conflict, but to keep American interests number one. But in a way, when you're the superpower, regardless of the country, they all do that with whatever global reach they have. Look at what China's trying to do with building ports for countries that are kind of broke. And then when the countries can't pay it back, they just take possession of that port. So, it's not about that, though. We're talking about this. Before we get started, thanks button on the channel. You can donate. You don't have to. Subscribe. And you can just give me a thumbs up. And let's get into the video.
You're hosting this live and letting us get the message out to more people, particularly to the UK, because as the team has said, we have the petition in the UK that we have a rather urgent deadline and a rather large quota of signatures that we need in order for that petition to be effective. So we're putting a great priority on the UK petition. So I hope that a lot of the audience out there right now is in the United Kingdom so that they can go and sign that petition and we can make it useful, inshallah. And as Sister said, once we get 10,000 signatures, then we will get a response from the government. They will acknowledge the petition. But if we have 100,000 signatures, inshallah, then we can actually, it will be brought up in the parliament, which in and of itself would be a historic achievement. To have it actually discussed in the Parliament of the United Kingdom to invoke Article 6 to have the United States expelled from the United Nations, in and of itself would be a historic achievement.
You're not expelling the United States from the United Nations. There are, was there 7 countries that are permanent, that they'll never... It's like America has tried to form the League of Nations under Woodrow Wilson. That didn't work. And then form the United Nations under, what's your name, bud? Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was actually the naval chief who did work to try to get the League of Nations going under Woodrow Wilson. But it's like building a house and then somebody saying, yeah, we signed a petition and we just want you kicked out of the house. We just want to use that house now. You're gone. That's not how it works.
At the same time, as they said, we're also focusing on the global petition that we have on change.org. We have a strategy moving forward. Once we get sufficient signatures on the global petition to where we'll be able to, the global petition is important in terms of being able to have the issue raised at the United Nations by a member state from the global south. For example, we have some good connections with political parties in South Africa. We have some potential connections with political parties in Nigeria and potentially engaging with the African Union, as well as potentially engaging with an organization of states called the Friends of the UN Charter. That we can approach about raising the issue of Article 6, because it does have to be raised at the United Nations by a member state. But the UK obviously is a very, very important country for us to sway and for us to have some pressure on the political establishment in the United Kingdom for the obvious reason that they're on the Security Council and they would be one of the states that would be more likely to side with the United States and potentially veto Article 6 if it was brought up at the Security Council. So we need to show the UK political establishment that there is inside of the UK support for the invocation of Article 6. And I just wanted to say something about the United Nations Charter. I heard Sister Samira talking about and I think that Brother AJ was talking, I missed that part, was talking about uh, what the UN Charter stands for, what the principles of the UN Charter are. And Sister Haya was talking about how the United Nations, there's nothing wrong with the institution. The institution is a good institution, but it hasn't been allowed to operate or to function properly. It hasn't been allowed to function or operate according to its own charter, and it has been prevented from doing so by the United States. So we don't have a problem with the United Nations. We don't have a problem with the UN Charter. We don't have a problem with the principles of the UN Charter. Quite the opposite. On the contrary, we believe in the UN Charter. We believe in the principles of the UN Charter, and that's precisely why we're calling for the invocation of Article 6, which is in the UN Charter, uh, that, as everyone probably by now hopefully should know, Article 6 is to be invoked against a member state which persistently violates the principles of the UN Charter. And we don't find, if we review the record of the United Nations, we can't find any member state that has so persistently violated the principles of the UN Charter as the United States. The United Nations.
Could you elaborate on that? What have they done to violate these things?
Charter is a contract between the governments of the world and the people of the world. And that means that the will of the people of the world is supposed to be represented by the United Nations, by the policy of the United Nations, by the actions of the United Nations, is supposed to reflect the will and the aspirations and the values of the global consensus of all of us. And all of our voices are being silenced on a regular basis, as we know, as we just saw with the vote on membership for Palestine in the United Nations, as we just saw. The overwhelming majority of nations in the world support the admission of Palestine into the United Nations as a full member, which also signals, of course, that the global consensus is that the overwhelming majority of nations in the world believe that Palestine deserves statehood. They deserve to have a state. They deserve to be acknowledged as a nation.
I don't know anything about Palestine or any of this vote thing. Not saying that it didn't happen, I just haven't heard anything about it. So I kind of don't know what he's talking about here.
And as we also saw in every single vote that there was on a ceasefire, the overwhelming majority of people in the world, the overwhelming majority of nations in the world, of countries in the world, of governments in the world, want a ceasefire and acknowledge that this is a genocide that needs to be stopped. And all of those voices, that's not just the voices of people in the United Nations, that's the voices of all of us. That's all of us. All of our voices are being vetoed. The United States is able to hit the mute button on all of the voices of all of the people in the world.
I do know they voted against one of the ceasefire agreements, and I don't know why. I thought it was stupid, but then I wondered if there was something that I missed. Yeah, I don't really think I don't think that we should have the right to tell another country when they can have a ceasefire or not. I would think that if a ceasefire gets brought on the table, like I'm sorry, but it shouldn't come to a vote. Like that should just be unanimously approved. And if somebody vetoes it, then what are you doing? Your vote doesn't count. Shut up. Get out of here.
When we are campaigning for the invocation of Article 6, this is for everyone. This is for us. This is the people of the world demanding that the terms of the contract that is...
Also, if America vetoes a ceasefire, what's stopping those countries from going ahead and enacting the ceasefire? What, is America going to show up and drop bombs? And no, come on, guys, blow a whistle. War's not over. I can't do whistle sounds. Come on, war's not over. Let's get going. No, they're not going to do that. So if there's a ceasefire agreement and everyone's agreed to it and America hasn't, what's stopping you from still enacting it? I'm going to say that America vetoed it because Israel probably didn't want it. And Israel wanted to continue the fight. But it's stupid for America to have done that. They should have just did a no vote. But Israel's an ally, and in America you can't say anything bad about Israel, and blah 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 blah. So I kind of get what he's saying, but you're not going to boot America out because of that. Sorry, it's just not going to happen.
Represented by the UN Charter, that should be actualized, that it should be acted upon, and that the nations of the world should uphold the terms of that contract that's between them and us.
Why didn't other nations of the world who voted for the ceasefire, America vetoes it, so then they step up, like, I'm just going to throw out a random country. Yugoslavia. That was random. Yugoslavia says yes to a ceasefire. I know they're probably should have picked somebody more UN adjacent, but let's just say them. Poland says yes, let's get a ceasefire. US says no. Why shouldn't, because look, America would do this, why shouldn't Poland say, we're going to send troops to that area to help initiate a ceasefire and a stop, because we want the conflict to end, and other countries join in on that? Now I know they wouldn't, but just let Israel know, hey, listen, we're going there. We're going there to protect these people. We're not there for war, but if you fire on us, you got a problem, because if you fire on us, we are in the UN, and a strike against us is a strike against all of us. So now you're making America have to decide, okay, yeah, let's go with the ceasefire, because now there's another problem. It's another element getting into all this. But yeah, I would just, if my country, if I'm looking at this and they said that, I would just let Israel know, we're coming in to that land where you're, going after, and we're just going to step in and we're just going to stop this. Like, we're done here. You're not coming past it. We're not allowing any more death past this. So all Palestinians want to get over on here in this protected area, because we're here. We're not there for war, but we do have our weapons, and we are going to defend our troops if need be, but we're calling it, this is done now. Like, what's to stop another country from doing that?
And the main force, the primary violator that is preventing that charter from actually being acted upon, and that is preventing the United Nations from functioning properly, as I've said, is the United States.
I'm sorry, no one's stopping anyone from enacting it. The U.S. votes against it. All the other countries could say, you know what? We're doing this. So that's all there is to it. I guarantee you, if they made that we're doing this, and they showed that force, the U.S. is going to kind of look at it like, okay. And now they have to get involved. But they're not going to get involved by going to war with those countries. They're now going to have to tell Israel, okay, you got to. But it's not America who's standing there telling everyone, okay, nope, you can't do it, you can't. It's all the other countries going, oh, well, no, do something. If it means that much to you and you've signed all this and you want all this, do something. America's over here. We don't control you. Then you do something. What's stopping Poland, North Korea? The countries that are always trying to stop fights. But honestly, what's stopping them? What, the threat of the U.S.? What are they going to do? Bomb you because you're trying to stop a war? Of course they're not.
So it's in everyone's interest, whether your issue is Gaza, or your issue is Palestinian statehood, or your issue is anything else. The fact of the matter is that for 75 years, the United States has been able to act with impunity, and it has been able to use the United Nations simply as a control mechanism for all of the countries in the world to ensure that its own policy, that American policy, can be the guiding policy for the rest of the planet, and
It's true and false.
it can overrule the global consensus. If you're not okay with that, if you actually believe that the world should operate according to consensus, and actually do value the principles in the UN Charter, I think anyone would, then you should sign the petition. When you brought up the student protests, they're protesting for their universities to divest from Israel, which is just a policy of choice that the universities can do or can't do as they like. It's up to them. There's no law about it. And the students are asking for them to change their policy. Okay, now imagine that it was illegal for them to be invested with Israel, for them to have any shared investments or affiliation with Israel. Imagine if it was illegal and the students were just asking for the law to be enforced. How much stronger their protest movement would be if they knew that they had the law on their side. And the same goes for boycotts and so forth. Every other type of protest movement, every other type of activist activity doesn't have the law on its side, except in terms of it being legal for them to protest. But what we're talking about is actually calling for the implementation of the law. The law is absolutely on our side. The thing that we're asking for is for the United Nations Charter to actually be acted upon, to be implemented. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for something that's either against the law or that is neutral. We're asking for the terms of the United Nations, what you can call the contract, as I said, the contract between the United Nations and the populations of the world. We're asking for that to be implemented. So we have the law on our side. So not only are we asking for something that's concrete and that will have very practical and immediate results once it is accomplished, it will have dramatic results on the entire international order. Not to mention, it will have direct impact on the Palestinian situation and the entire conflict between Palestine and the Zionists. So it's a concrete demand. It's a concrete step. It will have practical impact, and it's the law. So we're not asking for something other than implementation of international law, which is represented by the United Nations Charter. This is absolutely the strongest position that you can take. And anyone who is protesting or marching or demonstrating for Palestine should be calling for the invocation of Article 6, because every other demand that you might make, or every other chant or slogan that you might make at a protest or a march or a demonstration, stop the genocide, free Palestine, from the river to the sea, whatever you might say, all of these are vague and abstract, and they don't call for practical steps to be taken that can actually resolve the problem. Invocation of Article 6 is a practical step. It's a concrete step, and it is just the implementation of the actual law. I know, mashallah, there's a lot of very active people in the UK who participate in demonstrations and marches and so on, and protests. You should be calling for invocation of Article 6, and please spread this message, because this is absolutely the most practical step that you can take to help to resolve a situation in Palestine that should have been resolved decades ago and would have been resolved decades ago if it weren't for the fact that the United States is in the United Nations and controlling.
So if we're going to bring up decades ago, and he's in the UK, is he going to bring up how the UK was involved with I just lost my train of thought. I just completely lost my train of thought. Well, apparently that wasn't too important. Anyways, I was giving the slippery slope argument of he's getting mad that that America vetoed one thing, so kick him out. Well, every country's vetoed something. I mean, Turkey was vetoing Ukraine entering the UN because there was it the president he was asking for things from Ukraine, and he didn't want to upset Russia and think. And it's just kind of like, really? So I mean, it's not like the U.S. is the only one who's ever done anything wrong. That's all I'm hearing. It's the U.S.'s fault. U.S.'s fault. U.S.'s fault. What's to stop the other countries from doing anything? But now you're wanting the people to do all this stuff. Well, how come the people in those countries weren't just saying, hey, look, we voted for something and the U.S. turned it down. Why aren't we doing this anyways? Like, come on.
The United Nations and preventing the United Nations from enforcing and protecting and preserving and upholding its own principles. If that weren't the case, and if it weren't the case of the United States being on the United Nations Security Council with the veto power, if this were not the case, then the situation in Palestine would have been resolved decades ago. And I'm afraid that if we don't get this accomplished, it's not going to be resolved for who knows how many more decades. The law is on our side. And by our, I mean us, the people, the populations of the world.
You're not getting them booted out of the UN. No country is going to vote on that. They're not going to do it because of ally agreements and all kinds of things that are involved. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It was stupid that they vetoed it, yes, but it's not going to happen. This is 14 minutes, 47 seconds of wasted energy this guy's given.
A contract between the United Nations and the populations of the world that's supposed to be guaranteeing us, not any government, not the powerful, not the elite, not the rulers, but us. It's supposed to be guaranteeing us.
The people didn't agree to the UN. Countries did. Those countries represent the people. But if I wanted us, the U.S., to do something, and I didn't say us, I meant like us as in the U.S. If I wanted us to do something, and I sent that forward, even if it was 100,000 things, do you honestly think an American delegate is going to go to the UN and put that out for everyone to vote on? No, it's not happening. Even if it was something good, even if it was something stupid, just because you have the signatures doesn't mean they're going to do it. And I understand he's saying the law's on their side, and it's not happening.
Peace and security. It's supposed to be guaranteeing us human rights and equality. It's supposed to be guaranteeing us the rule of law on the planet. It's supposed to be guaranteeing us that things operate internationally according to a global consensus, which represents our will and aspirations. So we're calling for that contract to be fulfilled. And the only reason that it hasn't been fulfilled is because of this particular member.
Oh, earlier I said, like Poland. And if Poland was there, and then Israel got into a fight with them because of the UN, no, NATO is because of that. That's completely different. But there's nothing stopping other countries from just going there. Who gives a shit? Like, I don't care what country you are. I don't care if I was the president of Ireland and I decided I'm going to go there and interrupt it, and America was like, well, no, you shouldn't. I'd be like, well, no, I'm going to. So shut your face. Like, I'd just do it. Who cares?
Who's the most persistent violator, which is the United States. So fortunately, alhamdulillah, it is included in the charter that there is a mechanism, there is a means, there is an option for resolving this problem. They had it included in there, and America signed that contract. They wrote the contract, but they never thought that that particular condition and that particular term would ever be applied to them. But there's anonymous signatories to the United Nations Charter, and that's all of us. That's the global population. So we have a right to...
You're an anonymous signer of... No, you're not. No. The countries signed up. The countries represent the people. But the people don't dictate terms to the country through the UN. That's just not I don't understand what you're saying on this. They dictate terms to, you know, you can do something for your own country, but I can't dictate for my country to do something to oppose some kind of law to other nations. Think about how ridiculous that is. It's not happening.
Demand this. What I was going to say is, there's a concern that's frequently raised about if the U.S. isn't there, then China will maybe dominate the UN, and it will be the same as you know, with the U.S. dominating the UN. But the way that the American economy is managed and run is extremely different from the way that the Chinese economy is managed and run. As everyone knows, the United States has been running for the last 70 years on a military-industrial complex. That's their.
The U.S. has had the world's #1 economy since 1871. That was not a military-industrial complex. That's something that Eisenhower mentioned in his address to the nation as he was leaving, and that was in the 1950s. So the previous 70 years before that was not a military thing.
Management system for the economy. They have boosted their economy through the Pentagon, the State Department of the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, the technology that we're using right now. I'm on a mobile phone. I'm sure many of you are on mobile phones. The internet, all of these things, the iPhone, all of this was developed by the Pentagon. It was developed through the military. It was all developed for military purposes. That means that the United States, for the last 70 years, 75 years, for the entirety of the existence of the United Nations, the United States has relied its economy upon the perpetuation of conflicts around.
So if it's so terrible, why do you have it?
Around the world. They've relied on that for their domestic economy. And they've used the United Nations as an instrument and as a tool for perpetuating conflicts, rather than for securing peace and security as is called for by the UN Charter. They're
I would say you should ask some of the countries, like Taiwan, if having that military show does some good for them when China's flying jets into their airspace with threats of war. You know, or how about the American Navy going in the Red Sea and some of these other places where most of the world's trade goes through, and pirates come through and try to attack these ships, and the U.S. has taken upon themselves to make sure that doesn't happen. We also do good. And if you're going to hold everything in the history of the U.S. to one veto, then you're an asshole. No disrespect.
Their economy has been managed on the basis of perpetuating conflicts around the world. The Chinese economy isn't based on that. The Russian economy isn't based on that. No one else's economy is based on that. So it's conceivable that if the U.S. is expelled from the United Nations and they're isolated and they are reduced in their ability to perpetuate conflicts around the world, it could ultimately, in the long term, affect the U.S. economy. But I think that's something that's going to happen anyway.
It's not going to happen anyway. Yeah, it's just... Sorry, bud. Yeah, I just, by the way, just heard about the Iran's president dying in a plane crash. 64 years old. It's terrible. I had heard that a plane had went down, and that was pretty much all I had heard. I didn't know anything else. But that's too bad. Okay. Well, I'm going to end this here. Unfortunately, guys, what he's saying isn't going to happen. But okay, give it a shot. I'd love to see it. So, we're going to end this here. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.